The reason that I'm showing you guys all of this is because unfortunately, Selenium does not have a nice way to identify elements. Unlike something like a QTP that has that nice little object spy, Selenium does not have that. Therefore, what happens is you spend most of your time, well, I shouldn't say most of your time, you spend a good portion of your time trying to identify elements. If the elements are easy to identify and the developers did a good job in making your application testable, then that time is almost negligible. However, if they did not do a good job helping you to automate the application, then you're going to spend a ton of time identifying web elements. And although that sucks, it's completely the opposite for something like a QTP, right? Where you don't spend a lot of time identifying elements because they have the nice object spy, but you spend a crap load of time coding because VBScript is such a weak language. So if you want to do something like click a button and wait for it, you have to write a shit ton of lines of code in order to make that happen. So it's kind of the trade-off, right? Maybe one day Selenium will add a nice object identification tool, but until then, we use tools like Selenium IDE just to get a little bit familiar, and Firepath and Firebug to help us identify. And once we learn all the skills that I'm teaching you guys in this course, you really won't care whether you have an object identification tool or not, because you guys are just gonna be machines at identifying elements. So having this IDE tool is nice, but the reason that you can't always use it is because it doesn't always work, or it doesn't always give you the most efficient identifier. For example, let's look at these two buttons over here. If you look at this one, Selenium first tells you to identify this button using this XPath, which is actually pretty excellent. However, the only reason it knows how to do that is because I gave these two buttons two different texts so that you guys can differentiate. But if you imagine that these are just like login buttons, right? One login button is in like the upper right corner, and another login button is maybe in the bottom right corner of the application. And if they're both called login and they both do exactly the same thing, they're just located at different spots in the HTML. So we can actually do that by looking here. This will give us kind of a, this is not an absolute path, but a partial path. Here's a relative one. So here's one that's a little bit better. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to put that in there. And then I want to look at the XPath button too. Right, again, it does a good job in selecting that. But then if I come here and then select that, go to my Notepad++ and paste that here, you guys can see that this XPath is almost exactly the same, except for this is form number 2 and this is form number 1. So what if any of these buttons were to change, right? If one button moved to one location, another moved to a different location, these absolute XPaths would no longer be good because this would not get you to the right object. Therefore, you have to learn the proper way to identify the elements, which would be in this case using something like this. And in this case, Selenium IDE did a great job in showing you guys that. But you should be able to pick that out on your own using the skills that I will teach you, so that you will never run into the issues that I mentioned and other issues that we will talk about a little bit later.